Hey everyone, thanks for joining me tonight. Before we dive in, drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? It means a lot to know you're out there, sharing this moment with me. Now, picture this. It's the winter of 1984, and the small town of Coldwater, Michigan, is suffocating under a blanket of snow and secrets. The kind of place where the wind howls through empty factories and the streetlights flicker like they're too tired to stay on. In this forgotten corner of the Rust Belt, something unthinkable happened, story so chilling it's been whispered about for decades. A story that still haunts the folks who lived through it. This is the tale of Maya Jackson, a 15-year-old girl with a spark in her eyes and a dream bigger than the crumbling town around her, and how she vanished into the shadows of a place no one dared to look. Maya was the kind of kid who lit up a room without trying. Her laugh was infectious, her sketches of far-off cities pinned to her bedroom walls like promises to herself. She was a dreamer in a town that had forgotten how to dream. Raised by her grandmother, Ruth, a diner waitress who poured every dime into Maya's art supplies. Ruth saw Maya's talent as a ticket out of Coldwater, a way to escape the rusted-out mills and the heavy silence of a town that had lost its heartbeat. But Coldwater wasn't kind to dreamers, especially not a black girl with a pencil and a vision. The townsfolk loved Maya's smile, but her ambition, that made some of them uneasy, like she was reaching for something they'd long given up on. Still, Maya kept sketching, her hands smudged with charcoal, her heart set on a future beyond the SNOWDRIFTS. Then there was Amos Tate, the old clockmaker who ran a dusty shop on Main Street. Amos was a mystery, a man with a limp and a past no one could quite pin down. Some said he'd been a brilliant engineer once, before a scandal sent him back to Coldwater to tinker with gears and springs. To Maya, he was a mentor, a quiet man who saw her sketches and didn't laugh. He'd talk about time, how every second was a thread in a larger tapestry, and Maya would listen, wide-eyed, as he spun ideas that felt bigger than the world she knew. But Ruth didn't trust Amos. His shop, with its ticking clocks and faint smell of oil, gave her a bad feeling, like the air was too thick with secrets. "Stay sharp, Maya," she'd say, her voice tight. "Not everyone who smiles is a friend." One icy evening, Maya told Ruth she was heading to the library to work on a school project. "I'll be back by 7, she promised, pulling on her scarf. She never made it home. By 8, Ruth was pacing, her heart pounding like a drum. By 9, she was on the phone with the sheriff, who sighed and said, "Kids wander off sometimes." The town searched, but it was half-hearted, like they'd already decided Maya had run away, chasing her big dreams. Ruth knew better. Her girl wasn't a runner, she was a fighter. Days turned to weeks, and the whispers grew. Maybe Maya got lost in the woods, maybe she hitchhiked out of town. But Ruth kept going back to Amos's shop, to the way his eyes didn't quite meet hers when she asked if he'd seen Maya that night. What was he hiding behind those ticking clocks? And what was that faint, rhythmic tapping coming from the back of his shop, too steady to be just another broken gear? That faint tapping in Amos Tate's clock shop lingered in Ruth's mind like a heartbeat she couldn't ignore. It was the kind of sound that burrowed deep, a whisper of something wrong in a town already heavy with wrongness. Coldwater, Michigan, in the winter of 1984, was a place where hope rusted faster than the old mill machinery, and secrets hid in plain sight, tucked behind the polite smiles of neighbors. Ruth Jackson, Maya's grandmother, wasn't one to let things slide. She'd raised Maya alone since her daughter passed, pouring every ounce of her strength into that girl's dreams. Maya's sketches, cityscapes alive with color, bridges, reaching for the skyward more than art to Ruth. They were proof her granddaughter could break free from Coldwater's grey grip. But now, with Maya gone, Ruth felt the town's cold tighten around her heart. And Amos's shop, with its endless ticking, became the center of her suspicion. Amos Tate was a puzzle no one in Coldwater bothered to solve. He'd shown up a decade ago, after the mill closures left the town hollow. Folks said he'd been someone important once, an engineer who built machines that could think, or so the rumors went. But something had gone wrong. Whispers of a failed experiment, a fire, a name struck from records. Now he fixed clocks, his hands steady but his eyes always distant, like he was seeing a world no one else could. To Maya, he'd been a guide, someone who saw her sketches and didn't laugh. He'd sit her down in the back of his shop, surrounded by gears and pendulums, and tell her stories of inventors who changed the world. "Time's a machine, Maya," he'd say, his voice low and warm. "Master it, and you master everything." She'd come home buzzing, her sketchbook filled with wild ideas, clocks that drew patterns, cities that moved like gears. But Ruth saw the way Amos looked at Maya, like she was a piece in one of his machines, and it made her skin crawl. The night Maya vanished, Ruth had stood at the kitchen window, watching snow pile up on the sill, waiting for her girl's familiar skip down the street. By 10, she was at the sheriff's station, her voice shaking but firm. Sheriff Danvers, a man worn down by Coldwater's endless complaints, leaned back in his chair. "She's a teenager, Ruth, probably off with friends or chasing some art idea." Ruth's eyes burned. "Maya, don't run off. She's home by 7, always." But the sheriff's shrug said it. Coldwater didn't look hard for kids like Maya, a black girl with big dreams. The town had already written her off as trouble, her talent twisted into a reason she'd gone astray. They searched the woods, the riverbank, even the old mill, but Amos's shop. Just a quick glance. "He's a good man, Ruth," Danvers said. "Helped my watch run like new." Ruth didn't buy it. She'd seen Amos that night, locking up late, his limp more pronounced, his face too calm for a man who'd just seen a missing girl. Days turned into weeks, and the town's interest faded like frost under the sun. Ruth kept going, knocking on doors, taping flyers with Maya's smiling face to every lamppost. She'd stop by Amos's shop, her heart pounding, asking questions he answered with the same rehearsed sadness. "I wish I knew more, Ruth," he'd say, his hands polishing a clock face. But that tapping, faint rhythmic, like a code kept pulling her back. One night, alone in the shop's alley, she pressed her ear to the wall and heard it again, steady and desperate. Was it Maya, or was Coldwater's silence playing tricks on her mind? Ruth stood in the alley behind Amos Tate's clock shop, her breath fogging in the icy air, the tapping echoing in her ears like a plea she couldn't answer. It was February 1984, and Coldwater's winter had settled into a relentless freeze, the kind that made your bones ache and your hope brittle. The town had moved on from Maya's disappearance, chalking it up to a runaway's whim, but Ruth knew her granddaughter was no runaway. Maya's sketches still hung on the fridge, her pencils untouched on her desk, a silent testament to a girl who planned her future with every stroke. That tapping sharp, deliberate, like a heartbeat trapped in stone, was all Ruth had to hold onto. She pressed her hand against the shop's cold brick wall, her fingers trembling, Was it Maya, fighting to be found? Or was her grief twisting sounds into something they weren't? She wanted to scream, to tear the wall down with her bare hands. But Coldwater didn't listen to women like her black grandmother with no proof. Just a gut that wouldn't quit. Meanwhile, across town, Deputy Clara Hensley was starting to question the sheriff's easy dismissal of Maya's case. Clara was new to Coldwater, a transplant from Detroit who'd seen enough to know when a town was hiding something. She'd read Maya's file, thin as it was, and it didn't sit right. A strata student, no history of trouble, gone without a trace. The sheriff's theory that Maya had run off to chase some big city art dream felt like a lazy excuse. The kind of story Coldwater told itself to avoid hard truths. Clara had seen the way folks looked at Maya's flyers, their eyes sliding away, like her absence was just another crack in the town's crumbling foundation. She'd also noticed Amos Tate, always polite but too quick to answer questions, his shop a fortress of ticking clocks. Clara started digging, quietly, on her own time. She talked to Maya's art teacher, Ms. Larson, who said Maya had been excited about a new project, something about capturing time that she'd discussed with Amos. She was glowing, Ms. Larson said, her voice catching, said Mr. Tate was teaching her things no one else could. Back at the shop, Amos was unraveling, in his own way. He'd always been careful, his life a precise mechanism of routine and secrecy. But Ruth's visits, her sharp questions, were like sand in his gears. He'd see her shadow in the alley sometimes, her silhouette lingering like a ghost he couldn't shake. Upstairs, in his cramped apartment, above the shop, he'd sit among his clocks, there ticking a chorus that drowned out the world. But that other sound, the tapping from below, was getting louder, more insistent. He'd built his secret well, a hidden room behind the basement wall, its entrance disguised by a false panel of shelves. He'd told himself it was necessary, that Maya was part of something bigger, a project to fix time itself, to make it perfect. She was his muse, her talent a spark he could mold. But now, with Ruth circling and the town whispering, he felt the mechanism slipping. He'd descend to the basement at night, his limp heavier, his hands shaking as he unlocked the hidden door. "You're part of the design," he'd whisper through the slot, his voice a mix of conviction and doubt. But the eyes staring back weren't the bright ones he'd first seen. They were hollow, defiant, and they scared him. Ruth, meanwhile, was piecing together her own clues. She'd found one of Maya's sketchbooks under her bed, its pages filled with drawings of clocks, their hands twisted into spirals, and cryptic notes about time's cage. One sketch showed a door, hidden behind shelves, with a single word, "Listen." Ruth's heart raced. She didn't know what it meant, but it felt like Maya was speaking to her, leaving a trail. She started watching Amos's shop at odd hours, noticing deliveries that came too late at night, boxes too heavy for clocks. Clara, too, was closing in, her late-night drives past the shop catching glimpses of Amos's silhouette moving in the dark. Neither woman knew the other was searching, but their paths were converging, drawn by that same desperate tapping. Was it Maya, fighting to break free? Or was Coldwater's silence hiding a truth too dark to face? The tapping in Amos Tate's clock shop grew louder in Ruth's dreams, a relentless rhythm that pulled her out of sleep each night, her heart racing like she could feel Maya's hand reaching through the dark. It was March 1984 now, and Coldwater. Winter clung to the town like a curse, the snow piling higher, the air sharp with the promise of something breaking. Ruth's days were a blur of diner shifts and sleepless nights, her body tired but her will unbreakable. She'd taken to sitting in her car across from Amos's shop, her fingers gripping the steering wheel, watching for anything, a light too late, a shadow too long. That sketchbook, with Maya's drawing of a hidden door and the word listen, was her only clue, a fragile thread tying her to her granddaughter. She'd shown it to Clara Hensley, the deputy who'd started asking questions, and Clara's eyes had narrowed, her jaw tight. "This isn't right, Ruth," she'd said, her voice low. "I'm gonna check that shop myself." Ruth wanted to believe her, but Coldwater had taught her trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. She kept her vigil, the tapping echoing. In her mind, a call she couldn't ignore. Clara was moving faster now, her instincts screaming that Maya's case wasn't just a runaway story. She'd pulled Amos's records, digging into his past. The whispers were true. He'd been an engineer, brilliant but reckless, fired from a Detroit lab after an experiment went wrong, leaving scars no one talked about. His clock shop was a front, Clara was sure, but for what? She'd started tailing him, noting his late-night walks to the shop's back door, his hands clutching heavy bags that didn't look like clock parts. One night, she parked near the alley, her breath shallow, and heard Ither tapping, faint but steady, like a code begging to be cracked. She radioed for backup, but Sheriff Danvers shut her down. "You're chasing ghosts, Hensley," he snapped. "Tate's just an old man." Clara didn't buy it. She went back to Maya's art teacher, Ms. Larson, who handed over a crumpled note Maya had left in class. "Mr. Tate says time can be fixed, but it needs a spark. I think I'm the spark." Clara's stomach twisted. She needed to get into that shop, but without a warrant. She was stuck unless she could catch Amos' slipping dot. Amos felt the walls closing in. The tapping from below was no longer just a sound, it was a rebellion, a crack in his perfect design. He'd spent months shaping Maya, teaching her to let go of her old self, to become part of his visional world where time didn't decay, where every second was flawless. He'd built the hidden room with care, its walls soundproof, its door a masterpiece of concealment. But Maya wasn't breaking the way he'd planned. Her eyes, once bright with dreams, now burned with something else, defiance, maybe even hate. He'd stopped sleeping, the clocks in his apartment ticking like accusations. Ruth's constant visits, Clara's patrol car circling closer. His machine was faltering. He stood in the basement, his hands shaking as he unlocked the hidden door. "You're almost ready," he whispered, his voice thin. "One more day, and time will be perfect." The tapping stopped, and the silence was worse, heavy with a threat he couldn't name. Ruth couldn't wait anymore. That night, she slipped into the alley, a flashlight in one hand, Maya's sketchbook in the other. The tapping was louder now, urgent, like a heart about to burst. She found the back door unlocked, a mistake Amos never made. Inside, the shop was a maze of shadows and ticking, the air thick with oil and something sour. Clara, on her own patrol, saw Ruth's car and followed, her hand on her holster. The two women, strangers bound by the same truth, stood in the dark, the tapping guiding them to a wall of shelves. Ruth's fingers found a seam, her heart pounding. Was Maya behind it? Or was this the moment Coldwater's secrets would swallow them both? Ruth's fingers trembled as they traced the seam in the wall of shelves, the faint tapping from behind it pounding in time with her heart. The air in Amos Tate's clock shop was thick, the ticking of countless clocks a mocking chorus that seemed to count down the seconds she had left to find Maya. It was late March 1984. and Coldwater's relentless winter pressed against the shop's windows, the snow outside glowing faintly under a streetlight. Clara Hensley stood beside her, her flashlight beam cutting through the shadows, her breath quick and shallow. "There's something here," Clara whispered, her voice tight with urgency. She pushed against the shelves, searching for a latch, a hinge, anything. Ruth clutched Maya's sketchbook, the drawing of the hidden door burning in her mind. The tapping grew frantic, almost desperate, like a voice screaming without words. Ruth's hope surged, but so did her fear. What if they were too late? What if the door opened to something worse than she could imagine? Clara's fingers found a hidden catch, and with a soft click, the shelves began to shift. But before they could move further, a shadow loomed behind them. Mamus, his limp barely noticeable now, his eyes glinting with a cold, calculated fury. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low, a knife's edge wrapped in velvet. Clara spun her hand on her holster, but Amos was faster, his movements eerily precise for a man his age. He held a heavy wrench, its metal catching the dim light. "This is my work," he said, his tone chillingly calm. "You're breaking the machine." Ruth's heart sank not just at the threat, but at the realization that Amos wasn't alone. A second figure stepped from the darkness of the shop's back corner. A woman Ruth vaguely recognized, Edith Crane, the town's librarian, her grey hair pulled tight, her face a mask of quiet devotion. "They don't understand, Amos," Edith said, her voice soft but firm, like she was scolding a child. Ruth's mind reeled. Edith, the woman who'd helped Maya find art books, who'd smiled at Ruth in the diner. She was part of this. The plot twisted, the stakes soaring. Amos wasn't just a lone eccentric, he had an ally, someone woven into Coldwater's fabric, hiding in plain sight. Clara's eyes darted between them, her gun half drawn, but the odds were shifting. "What's behind that door?" Clara demanded, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Amos smiled, a thin, cruel curve. "Time," he said, "the perfect moment, preserved. She's almost ready." Ruth's blood ran cold. He was talking about Maya, her girl, her spark, reduced to a piece in his warped vision. The tapping stopped, replaced by a faint, muffled sound, a sob or a word too soft to make out. Ruth's knees buckled, but she caught herself, her rage burning through the fear. "Maya," she shouted, her voice raw, echoing in the shop. The clocks seemed to tick louder, a chaotic symphony, as if time itself was unraveling. Edith stepped closer, her hands clasped like she was praying. "You're interrupting something sacred," she said, her eyes gleaming with a fanatic's certainty. "She's becoming eternal." Clara pushed the shelves harder, the door creaking. Open an inch, releasing a whiff of damp, sour air that made Ruth gag. But Amos raised the wrench, and Edith's hand slipped into her pocket, pulling out something small and glinting, a key or a blade. The room felt like it was shrinking, the walls closing in, the tapping gone silent. Was Maya still there, fighting? Or had Coldwater's secrets already claimed her, leaving Ruth and Clara one step away from a truth that could break them? The air in Amos Tate's clock shop turned, suffocating as the hidden door creaked open, the foul stench of damp and decay spilling out like a warning. Ruth's heart thundered, her eyes locked on the sliver of darkness beyond the shelves, where the tapping had stopped, leaving a silence that screamed louder than any sound. It was March 1984, and Coldwater's winter seemed to hold its breath as Clara Hensley shoved the shelves aside. Her gun now drawn, her flashlight beams slicing through the shadows. Amos stood frozen, the wrench in his hand trembling, his face a mask of rage and fear. Edith Crane, the librarian, clutched a small blade, her eyes wild with a zealot's fire. "You'll ruin everything," Edith hissed, stepping forward, but Clara's voice cut through, sharp and steady. "Drop it, now." Ruth didn't wait, she lunged for the door, her fingers clawing at the gap, desperation giving her strength. The shelves gave way with a groan, revealing a narrow concrete cell, its walls slick with mold, a single flickering bulb casting a sickly glow. There, on a tattered blanket, sat Maya, her granddaughter, her spark gaunt and pale, her eyes wide with terror, a broken clock. Spring clutched in her hand. "Maya." Ruth cried, her voice breaking, but Maya flinched, curling into herself, as if the sound of her own name was a wound. Clara moved fast, pinning Amos against the wall, the wrench clattering to the floor. Edith lunged, her blade flashing, but Ruth, fueled by years of grief and rage, grabbed her wrist, twisting until the knife fell. "Where's my girl?" Ruth shouted, her voice raw, as Clara cuffed Amos, her face grim. Edith collapsed, sobbing, muttering about perfect time and sacred work. The police swarmed in minutes later, alerted by Clara's earlier call, and the shop became a chaos of flashlights and radios. Maya was carried out, her body frail, her eyes darting like a trapped animal's. At the hospital, Ruth sat by her side, holding her hand, but Maya's gaze was distant, her fingers twitching as if still gripping that clock spring. Dr. Ellis, a kind-eyed trauma specialist, explained the damage. "She's been conditioned to forget herself. It's like her mind's been rewound, stripped of who she was." Ruth's heart shattered, but she nodded, vowing to help Maya find her way back. Sketch by sketch, memory by memory, Amos and Edith were arrested, their twisted plan unraveling in interrogations. They'd seen Maya as a vessel for their delusional, dreamer machine to capture time, her creativity a spark to fuel their madness. The hidden room, lined with sketches Maya had been forced to draw, was their shrine, a grotesque attempt to freeze perfection. Cold water reeled, the town's indifference exposed, its silence broken. Clara was hailed as a hero, but she brushed it off, her eyes haunted by what she'd seen. Ruth, though, felt no victory, only the weight of rebuilding her granddaughter's soul. Months later, Maya began to speak, her voice a whisper, her first word, "Grandma," a fragile thread pulling them back together. She started sketching again, simple lines at first, a bridge, a river, signs of the girl she'd been. But then, the final twist. One night, as Ruth sorted through Maya's old sketchbook, she found a new drawing tucked inside a clock, its hands spiraling inward, and beneath it, a note in Maya's shaky hand. "He's still ticking." Ruth's blood ran cold. Amos was in jail, Edith too, but the note felt like a warning, a shadow that hadn't lifted. She looked out the window, the snow falling again, and heard it a faint, rhythmic ticking, like a clock that refused to stop. Was it her imagination, or was cold water hiding another secret, waiting to strike? The faint ticking Ruth heard that night, echoing from the snowy darkness outside her window, lingered like a ghost she couldn't shake. It was late summer 1984 now, and Coldwater, Michigan was thawing, the town's heavy silence broken by the scandal of Maya Jackson's rescue from Amos Tate's hidden cell. Ruth sat by Maya's side in their small rented house, the walls bright with new sketches. Maya had drawn tentative lines of rivers and bridges, signs of her spirit clawing its way back. Maya was different, quieter, her eyes still carrying the shadows of that concrete prison. But she was home, her hand warm in Ruth's, her voice slowly returning. That first word, Grandma, had been a spark, and Ruth held onto it, tending it like a fragile flame. Dr. Ellis, the trauma specialist, worked with Maya weekly, helping her piece together the fragments of her identity. "She's rebuilding herself," he told Ruth, his voice kind but cautious. "It's slow, but she's fighting." Ruth nodded, her heart aching with pride and sorrow, knowing the girl who dreamed of cities might never fully return. But this Maya, her survivor, was enough. The town reeled from the truth about Amos and Edith Crane. Their arrests exposed a sickness in cold water, a willingness to look away from a black girl's disappearance, to let prejudice write her story. Amos confessed in a chilling monotone, describing his obsession with fixing time, believing Maya's creativity could fuel his delusional machine. Edith, the librarian, had been his disciple, her quiet devotion masking a fanatic's heart. Their hidden room, lined with Maya's forced sketches, was dismantled, the evidence sealing their life sentences. Deputy Clara Hensley, hailed as a hero, stayed on in cold water, her determination forcing the sheriff's department to reckon with its failures. She visited Ruth and Maya often, bringing art supplies, her presence a quiet apology for the town's neglect. "I should have pushed harder," Clara admitted once, her eyes downcast. Ruth squeezed her hand. "You brought her back. That's what matters." That ticking, though, kept Ruth awake. Maya's note, "He's still ticking," felt like a warning, a thread left dangling. Ruth searched the house, the yard, even Amos's old shop, now boarded up, but found no clocks, no answers. One evening, Maya, now sketching with more confidence, handed Ruth a new drawing, a clock with spiraling hands, but this time a river flowed through it, free and unbroken. "It's not him," Maya whispered, her voice shaky but clear. "It's me. I hear it in my head sometimes, like I'm still there, but I'm not." Ruth's eyes filled with tears, realizing the ticking wasn't Amos or another secret eat, was Maya's trauma, a rhythm she was learning to quiet. Dr. Ellis confirmed it. "She's processing. The mind holds on to echoes. She's naming them, and that's how she let them go." By fall, Maya spoke more, her laugh a soft echo of the girl she'd been. She joined an art class, her sketches bolder, her breeches reaching higher. Ruth framed the river drawing, hanging it by the window where the sun caught it. Cold water changed too slowly, grudgingly. Maya's story sparked a community reckoning, with vigils and apologies, though Ruth knew some wounds would never fully heal. The key takeaway was clear. Love and resilience could outlast even the darkest secrets. One crisp morning, Maya sat outside, sketching a sunrise, and said, "Grandma, I want to build something real someday." Ruth smiled, her heart full. The ticking was gone, replaced by the sound of Maya's pencil on paper, a rhythm of hope. Coldwater's ghosts might linger, but Maya was no longer one of them. She was alive, drawing her way back to herself.